This presentation is all about the muscular system, the lower body. First, let me define what is a muscular system. Muscular system consists of various types of muscles that each play a crucial role in the functionality in the body. Humans have three kinds of muscles. These are the skeletal, smooth, and cardiac muscles. Skeletal muscles are also called striated because it is made up of fibers that has horizontal stripes in it when viewed under a microscope. These are the muscles that you can find in your legs, arm, and your face. The next type of muscle is the smooth muscles. These muscles are involuntary. We can't consciously control them. Rather, they are being controlled by the nervous system. It can be found in your stomach and intestines. The next muscle, the last one, is the cardiac muscle, also called as myocardium. You can see this muscle in your heart. This is the muscles that can be found in the thick middle layer of the heart. So next, let me explain to you on the process of how muscles work in the body. So basically, the movements that our muscle make are coordinated and controlled by the brain and the nervous system. The involuntary muscles are controlled by structures deep within the brain and the upper part of the spinal cord called the brainstem. The voluntary muscles are controlled by the parts of the brain known as the cerebral motor cortex and the cerebellum. So basically, when you decide to move, the motor cortex sends an electrical signal through the spinal cord and peripheral nerves to the muscles, causing them to contract. The motor cortex on the right side of the brain controls the muscles on the left side of the body, and vice versa. The cerebellum coordinates the muscle movements ordered by the motor cortex. Sensors in the muscles and joints send messages back through the peripheral nerves to tell the cerebellum and the other parts of the brain where and how the arm or leg is moving and what position it's in. This feedback results in smooth, coordinated motion. When you run, the messages to the brain are more involved because many muscles have to work in rhythm. Muscles move body parts by contracting and then relaxing. Muscles can pull bones, but they can't push them back to the original position, so they work in pairs in flexors and extensors. The flexor contracts to bend a limb at a joint. Then when the movement is completed, the flexor relaxes and the extensor contracts to extend or straighten the limb at the same joint. Now the lower body can be divided into several parts or regions as follows: hip, thigh, knee, leg, ankle, and foot. So let's talk about the hip muscles. Hip muscles are skeletal muscles that enable the broad range of motion of the ball and socket joint of the hip. So this is the gluteus region muscles. The illustration on the left side, you can see the gluteus maximus. This small muscle here that is connected to the iliotibial band, it's called the tensor fascia lata. And here on the right side of the screen, you'll see the cut portion of the gluteus maximus. That way we will be able to see properly what's underneath the gluteus maximus. It's called maximus because it means it's the biggest muscle. Okay, underneath the gluteus maximus is the gluteus medius. What it does is abduction at the hip. Underneath that, located at the deep means it's the muscle that is closest to the bone, is the gluteus minimus. It also does abduction at the hip. I forgot to mention gluteus maximus. What it does is extension at the hip joint and lateral rotation. Lateral rotation means it helps move the limb to the sides. So here is the iliopsoas group. The psoas minor. The iliopsoas group is comprised of three muscles: the psoas minor, psoas major, and iliacus. All these muscles, what it does is flexion at the hip. Just one tiny information I want to add: the psoas minor, about the psoas minor. Okay, psoas minor is considered as a very weak muscle, so its absence doesn't really result in any reduced functionality in the body. Then let's talk about the muscles located at the tip portion of the hip area. These are the piriformis, as you can see from there, obturator externus, quadratus femoris, superior gemellus, obturator gemellus, inferior gemellus. All these muscles, what they do is lateral rotation. They are all synergies to each other. It means that they all do the same function. Now let's talk about the common diseases that is related to hip muscles. The first one is, sorry, let me just move my camera a bit. Weak hip flexors. A person with weak hip flexors may experience lower back pain or hip pain and may have difficulty in doing certain activities such as walking or climbing stairs. Weak hip flexors can affect a person's posture and the way they walk. So see this photo on the right, it shows a person who is suffering from weak hip flexor. Next is the trochanteric bursitis. It is more common in women than in men. It most often occurs in people aged 30 to 50 years. It is usually caused by stresses at muscles insertions on the greater trochanter, leading to inflammation. Okay, now let's talk about the thigh muscles. The thigh is the region between the hip and the knee joints. It is divided into three groups: the anterior thigh muscles, posterior thigh muscles, and the medial thigh muscles. Anterior, that means these are the muscles that are located at the front of the thigh. Posterior are the ones located at the back, and medial is the muscles that are located in the middle. So here there are 5 muscles in the anterior thigh compartment. These are the sartorius and the quadriceps. Quadriceps means 4 heads. These are the rectus femoris, vastus medialis, vastus lateralis, and sorry, I forgot to write in this one, the vastus intermedius. So let me just show you on this illustration. So you can see this very long muscle that started from here all the way. It is attached to the femur bone. That is the sartorius muscles. What this does is it flexes the whole leg at the hip, flexes at the knee. It also does lateral rotation. Then there's the vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, vastus intermedius. Rectus femoris is this muscle. Rectus means straight, and femoris because it is attached to the femur bone. These muscles, what they do is extension at the knee. So now let's talk about the medial thigh muscles. The muscles in the medial thigh are adductor magnus, adductor brevis, adductor longus, and the gracilis. Adductor magnus, adductor brevis, and adductor longus, what they do is adduction at the hip. When you say adduction, that means they bring the limb back to the central axis of the body. Then there's gracilis. It also does adduction at the hip, flexion at the knee, and medial rotation. Now let's talk about the posterior thigh muscles. It is composed of 3 muscles: the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. So these are these muscles. You can see this is the biceps femoris, semitendinosus, and semimembranosus. Bicep femoris means two heads, and femoris is because it's attached to the femur bone. One thing I have to tell, when referring to the bicep femoris, you always have to mention the other name. You can't just say biceps, because how would I know if you are referring to the bicep brachia? It's the muscle located at the arm. So you always have to say bicep femoris. Okay? So these muscles, what they do is extension at the hip joint and flexion at the knee. Now let's talk about the diseases related to thigh muscles. The most common one I found is myositis. Myositis is the name for a group of rare conditions. The main symptoms are weak, painful, or aching muscles. This usually gets worse slowly over time. Hold on, let me move my camera. Okay. Polymyositis. It affects many different muscles, particularly the shoulder, hips, and thigh muscles. More common in women and tends to affect age 30 to 60. Next is muscle atrophy. When muscles waste away, it's usually caused by a lack of physical activity. So this is a photo of a person suffering from muscle atrophy. Muscles of the knee joint. The two main muscle groups are the quadriceps on the anterior side of the knee and femur, and the hamstrings on the posterior side. The four muscles of the quadriceps, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, vastus intermedius, and rectus femoris, our function is to extend the knee. So the first part I want to discuss is the quadriceps. The The one right here, the big muscle in the front, is called rectus femoris. Rectus, it means straight. It's a straight muscle, and femoris because, again, it's connected to the femur bone. What it does is flexion at hip and extension at the knee. Then there's vastus intermedius, vastus lateralis, and vastus medialis. What they do is extension at the knee. Now let's discuss about the hamstrings. Semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and biceps femoris. Biceps means it has two heads. Okay. What they do is extension at the hip and flexion at the knee. Now let's talk about the diseases that is related to knee muscles. The most common one that I found is the knee osteoarthritis. Quadriceps, hamstrings, and hip muscles are significantly impaired in subjects with knee osteoarthritis compared with age-matched controls. Muscle strength, especially the quadriceps, is a major determinant of both performance-based and self-reported physical function. So you can see here from the right side of the screen, you can see a person, an example of a person suffering from osteoarthritis. Okay, now let's talk about the muscles of the leg. The leg is divided into three major anatomical compartments, each one containing a specific group of muscles. These are the anterior group, lateral, and posterior group. Now first let's discuss about the anterior compartment. The tibialis anterior, what it does is dorsiflexion and inversion of the ankle. Next is the extensor hallucis longus. What it does is it extends the hallux and dorsiflexes foot at the ankle. Next will be the extensor digitorum longus. What it does is extension of the digits and dorsiflexion. Also, it does inversion of the ankle. Lastly will be the fibular tertius or peroneus tertius. it does dorsiflexion and eversion of the foot. Next is the lateral compartment of the leg. The fibularis brevis and fibularis longus. What it does is eversion at the ankle and plantar flexion. Now let's go to the posterior compartment of the legs. These are the muscles that are located at the back of your legs. Okay, the first part is the deep posterior compartment of the leg. Again, this is the muscles that are closest to your bones, deepest. There's popliteus, flexor digitorum longus, tibialis posterior, flexor hallucis longus. Okay, flexor hallucis longus, what it does is it flexes the toes. It flexes the big toe. Next will be the flexor digitorum longus. What it does is it flexes the digit and plantar flexion. Also, it does inversion of the foot, of the ankle. Another thing is the popliteus. Here, the one, this golden muscle here from this illustration. And what this does is flexion at the knee. And lastly is the tibialis posterior. It does inversion of the ankle and plantar flexion. Now let's talk about the superficial posterior compartment of the leg. Okay, here is the plantaris muscle. What it does is plantar flexion and flexion at the knee. And this big muscle right here is called the gastrocnemius. It is also called the belly of the calf or the stomach of the leg because it's a very visible muscle. You can even see it from outside your leg. It's that big bump there. So what it does is plantar flexion. And next will be the soleus muscle. It also does plantar flexion. Now, the common diseases related to leg muscles. Okay, the first one that I found is the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, commonly referred to in the US as Lou Gehrig's disease. As ALS progresses, the degeneration of motor neurons in the brain interfere with messages to muscles in the body. Eventually, muscles atrophy and voluntary control of muscles is lost. So here is a photo of Stephen Hawking. He's a very famous scientist, a physicist, I think. So he has this disease, this amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Okay, next is the tibial muscular dystrophy. It is a condition that affects the muscles at the front of the lower leg. The signs and symptoms of this condition typically appear after age 35. The first sign is usually weakness and wasting, atrophy of a muscle in the lower leg called the tibialis anterior. So this is the only photo I found online that shows this disease. Now let's talk about the muscles acting on the ankle joints. So the tibialis posterior, what it does is inversion at the ankle and plantar flexion. It's this one, the first on the upper part. Next is the flexor digitorum longus. It flexes the digit, also does the inversion at the ankle and plantar flexion. The last thing is flexor hallucis longus. What it does is it flexes the big toe. Now what I have here is a disease related to the ankle muscles. Achilles tendinitis. It is an overuse injury of the Achilles tendon. the tissue that connects scalp muscles at the back of the lower leg to your heel bone. Muscles of the foot. So actually this photo that I got is a combination of the tendons and foot muscles, but I'm just going to discuss about the foot muscles only. So the first muscle is the peroneus brevis. What it does is plantar flexion of the ankle and eversion of the ankle. Next is the peroneus tertius. What it does is eversion and dorsiflexion of the foot. Last thing is the extensor digitorum brevis. It extends the digits. Now the diseases related to foot muscles. Okay, plantar fasciitis is one of the most common causes of heel pain. It involves inflammation of a thick band of tissue that runs across the bottom of each foot and connects the heel bone to toes, plantar fascia. Another thing is Morton's neuroma. It involves a thickening of the tissue around one of the nerves leading to your toes. This can cause a sharp, burning pain in the ball of your foot. Now, let's talk about some fun facts about the muscular system, the lower body. Did you know that the largest muscle in the body is the gluteus maximus? Yes, you heard that right. It's the main extensor muscle of the hip, though you may know it as the large muscle in the buttocks. The gluteus maximus is the main muscle used to help you walk upstairs. Number 2. Muscles can't push, they can only pull. Muscles can pull bones, but they can't push them back to its original position. Number 3. The longest muscle in the body is the sartorius muscle. The sartorius muscle is found running the inner side of your thigh. Number 4. Muscles provide body heat, and not just a little bit. In fact, your muscles create at least 85% of your total body heat. Number 5 and the last one. Did you ever dream of falling from a height when you are asleep? It is a pretty common thing. This phenomenon is called hypnic jerk or hypnagogic jerk. These movements are caused by our muscles. And that concludes my presentation. I hope you learned something about the muscular system, the lower extremities, or also called as the lower limb or lower body. Thank you.